Welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Mr. Ankit Mehra, who is the co-founder of GyanDhan, which is an education financing platform that facilitates easy study loans for students. Hi, Ankit. Welcome to ELI.
Thanks for having me, Prem.
I would request you to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Cool. So I'm Ankit Mehra, one of the co-founders at GyanDhan. About myself, so I was born and brought up in Bhagalpur. I did my early schooling in Bhagalpur and then moved to Delhi to do my 11th and 12th. As is typical for most folks, if you're good at maths, you probably get into or apply for JEE. So entered IIT JEE exam, got into IIT Kanpur, did my engineering and mechanical engineering, and that's where I realized I didn't want to do engineering. So as is typical for most engineers, I never touched engineering after my undergrad. Was lucky that I got selected into Capital One, which was a bank based out of the US. So they had a analytical based approach to interviews. So I got through that, and that was a good experience for me because I joined a very small team within a big bank. And later on, when I was in business school, that's when I realized that my experience at Capital One was more about entrepreneurship. That is when I realized that what I was doing at Capital One was probably entrepreneurship because it was a very small team and we were trying to build or maintain a business in a big bank
Mm-hmm.
and trying to export Capital One's way of thinking into the new bank.
Okay.
So worked at Capital One in the small business lending team for almost 6 years. And then 2013, I thought, ho gaya finance ka, now I'm probably going to switch to something else. And the idea was, hey, I'll move back to India and do something in the sports sector. Because a lot of growing up, I felt that a lot of learnings around team came to me really on the sports field. So I really wanted to do something in the sports sector in the Indian markets. And with that in mind, I moved from Washington, D.C. to Barcelona to pursue my MBA from ESA Business School. And I thought, I'll work with the Barcelona club, I'll work with a couple of marketing firms and then move back to India. But when I got into business school, that's when I realized that obviously education was fairly expensive. But more importantly, a lot of my colleagues were finding it hard to pay for their education. And coming from Capital One, where I'd spent 6 years building models, doing credit analytics, it really didn't sit well with me. I thought, hey, there has to be a better way. I mean, if I am a smart student, have a good pedigree, and have gotten into a top 10 business school, it shouldn't really be a matter of how much money my parent has so that I can get a loan or not.
Okay.
So with that intent, I think my plans for doing something in the sports sector probably took a backseat. That dabbled with the sports thing for the first year during my business school, but by the end of the first year, I had sufficient discussions that I decided to plunge full time into GyanDhan. So 2015, when I graduated out of ESA Business School, I just moved back immediately. Didn't even attend my graduation ceremony because I thought that, hey, I mean, it'll just be a waste of time now. So I just started GyanDhan immediately. And on this journey, I was joined by Jainesh. So Jainesh is my co-founder. And I'll just quickly talk about Jainesh because that is also very critical for our journey. So Jainesh is a graduate from IIT Delhi, 2009 batch, and he worked with ZS Associates for a year before joining Capital One. So we worked together at Capital One, and when I was moving back, I really wanted who should be a because I got frustrated thinking of this problem statement and figuring out what could be done on my own. And I knew Jainesh would be the right partner, and the reason really was because of Jainesh's experience before getting into IIT. So typically the way it works still is you go for coaching before getting into IIT, right? But what if you don't even have the means to pay for a coaching exam, right? So Jainesh benefited from this program called Super 30 that since been made into a movie. So he was one of the first beneficiaries of that program, and he has seen that first-hand experience in terms of what a lack of access to financing can do for different folks. So he always had that thought process of, hey, we have to do something like that, but at scale. And it can only be done if you are doing a for-profit initiative. So that is the thing. When I moved back, I knew Jainesh would be the right partner. And I called him up. He was planning to go to his Chicago booth MBA program, but then finally didn't go for the program and he moved back to India and he started GyanDhan. So that's quickly about me. I mean, outside of work, I spend most of my time with my daughter. I have a small daughter, and it takes up a lot of my time. I enjoy spending time with her, and then outside of that, I have gotten into the habit of gardening. So nowadays we have a terrace garden at home and we have a terrace garden in the office. So there are quite a lot of vegetables we grow both at office and at home.
I think that's a nice story, or nice path to entrepreneurship. Tell us a little bit about GyanDhan, and before that, can you set the context by telling what is the underlying problem right now in Indian
Sure.
education loan market? And there are a lot of banks which are offering student loans, and it's one of the common products in banks. But why can't students access them easily? Considering there are a lot of digital banking initiatives and mobile apps, and they say with 2-3 clicks you can disburse the loan. But why is it not possible in education loan, and how you are solving it?
Sure. So the first thing is essentially I'll go back to my own example in terms of ES a business school, right? So there is a student who has probably done some work, has gained some work experience, and then applied to a top 10 business school, gotten into a business school, and now they're trying to find ways to pay for their education. So this was back in 2013. Right now, at that point in time, when they were applying to Indian banks, the answer that we got was, hey, Indian banks are only doing loans up to 7.5 lakhs. Some banks were saying, hey, we'll do loans up to 20 lakhs if you provide a collateral. Now, the
Mm.
thing that is important to understand is it's a top 10 business school. The total cost of education is 1 crore. So the idea, if you give me a loan of 20 lakhs, that's almost like a charity because
Mm.
it's not going to solve my problem. Either
Yeah,
I already had that 1 crore, so I don't really need a loan, or if I really need a loan, then 20 lakhs is not going to solve my problem at all.
that's right.
And even the folks who were, there were a couple of NBFCs that that point in time that had started. They were doing some a little larger amounts, not to the tune of 1 crore, but they were doing some relatively larger amounts. But still, the rates were very high, and the process was very inefficient.
Hmm.
So the idea really came from this whole aspect of going back to small business lending that I was doing at Capital One, where we were saying, ki, hey, who should we give a loan to?
Mm.
And will they be able to repay? So the basics of lending is you have to assess ability and willingness to repay.
Mm.
If I give a loan to someone, how do I will he, does he or she have the ability to repay, and will they be have the right intent? Now, the reason why education loan is a bit different than most other loans is because, I mean, if you're taking a home loan, yeah, I mean, the property is already there, so it's a secured loan, similar for car loan.
Mm.
Even in the personal loans, in many cases, you know the end use and it's immediate,
Mm.
and the person is working. Education loan is unique in the sense that if you do a true student loan, so
Mm.
don't take parent into consideration, then it's effectively like an infrastructure financing,
Mm.
wherein I am investing money in a person and they will start earning probably 2 years from now or 2.5 years from now. And that's when they'll start repaying.
Mm.
Right. So you have to bet on the student.
Mm.
And that is something lenders typically have not had a good handle on. Right. So, and that is the reason why typically lenders have said, ki, we will do secured loans because they say, hey, we don't understand or we don't know how to predict who will get a job or who will not get a job or which course is good, which course is not. So, the easiest thing is your father has a property or your mother has a property of 1 crore. I'll give you a loan of 60 lakhs or 70 lakhs or 80 lakhs. Right.
Mm.
But then that is the fundamental challenge. Wherein if you are saying, ki, hey, education will be the great leveler, it can help you cross bound kind of socioeconomic boundaries.
Mm.
I mean, that has to happen, then you have to be able to do loans on the basis of students.
That's right.
Right. So coming to numbers, really like there are different segments. So the problem is in the domestic segment. The problem is in students going abroad. So problems are across the space. If
Mm.
I first talk about the study abroad segment, right now estimates are Indian students spend typically $30 billion every year.
Mm.
Only $2 billion is roughly being financed by all lenders put together.
Okay.
And the idea problem really stems from the fact that at the end of the day, if I have a property, then I'll get a loan in most cases from big banks, the public sector banks. Otherwise, getting loans is not possible for the big programs. Now, if I have a property and the process is still cumbersome, then why will I ever take a loan?
Yeah.
The process is cumbersome. Even if I remove the process, the cumbersome part, the product doesn't exist. So I'll go back to the example of my cost of education is 1 crore. If you can only give me 20 lakh a loan, I don't need that loan. It's
Mm.
not really helping me any which way.
Okay.
So that 2 billion versus 30 billion is the big difference,
Mm.
right? Even in the domestic market, coming to the domestic market, there is a sufficient amount of lending that has happened in the past.
mm,
Now that was post the government came out with different regulations and made changes to the education loan policy. Now, the problem that fundamentally happened was at some point in time, that fine line between what I was talking about predicting students' future income
mm,
that got lost. So what ended up happening is in the domestic market is you have almost $10 billion worth of loans given out
mm,
at this point in time. Banks' NPA ratios are very, very high. So because students have been given loans for courses that will not get a job.
mm,
So they have given out loans without thinking what will they earn in the future. And as a result of that, now students cannot repay that loan.
mm,
And because students cannot repay that loan, now if a new student goes in for even for a good course,
mm,
the banker in the bank says कि यार मेरे को पता नहीं है कि will this guy get a job or not, because I am seeing 10 NPAs in my list. Why do I take the headache of this? Let me give out a home loan. Let me figure out a home loan. So if you walk into a bank, my answer will be I will not cater to you. I'll not talk to you, or I'll make the
mm,
process so cumbersome. It's better that you walk to a different branch or
mm.
different bank. I don't care. Don't come to me. That is a simple answer. And
Okay.
that is what we want to solve for.
Got you. Problem, you define it well. Tell us how you are solving it through your platform, and tell us a bit about your platform. How, what are the different modules? How does a student interact, and how does a, partner bank, which is, giving the actual loan, what
Yes.
does take place in the back end?
Yes. So, at a high level, GyanDhan is a uh, education financing platform. So, the way I like to call it is, I mean, it's like you will buy some stuff on Amazon. There will be different
Mm,
vendors,
mm,
right? So, you want to buy a pen, there might be different vendors to sell the same pen.
mm.
Similarly, there is an education loan product. We have different banks and NBFCs lined up on one end.
Okay.
And now student comes in, what we do is we figure out ki basis your profile, which is the best lender. So if I give the pen analogy,
Mm,
maybe you need a pen today,
mm,
then the answer might be different.
right.
Maybe you need a pen 3 days from now, then the answer will be different
Mm,
because the cost might be a priority. Maybe you need a pen that doesn't leak,
mm,
it doesn't have some issues, right? The ratings might be an issue. So similarly, what we do is once a student comes to GyanDhan platform, they fill a basic loan eligibility form.
mm.
On the basis of that, we say, hey, we have these lenders, which is the best lender for you?
Okay.
And after that, we'll start your loan product with that particular lending partner.
Mm,
Now, after that, what happens is in some of the lenders, we have technical integration. So we'll start your process at that lender bank itself. So the
mm,
idea is the product doesn't change at all, number
mm,
one. So
mm,
it's not like hey, if I go through GyanDhan, it will be costly for me. It will
mm,
actually be the same product.
mm,
There is no additional cost levied by GyanDhan.
mm,
If anything, what will happen is you might get better negotiating power on the rate in
mm.
some cases. And definitely you will get the best product. And if you have any issues, we are
Mm.
here to solve the issues.
Okay.
So I'll give a couple of examples. Like in the first year, and this was the first year of our journey back in 2016.
Mm,
There was a customer from Satara. His father was a farmer, and they had a property that they could mortgage, and he wanted a loan against property. We figured out that there was a particular lender that was fit for him. We told them let go with this lender. Now what happened in that particular case was the customer went to the bank. The bank manager said कि हमारे पास ऐसा loan ही नहीं है. We don't do
mm,
this loan.
mhm,
And now the guy thinks like, okay, I mean, this is a bank, so they might be saying the truth. So the
mhm,
thing is that bank manager does not have the understanding or the willingness to do that loan,
mhm,
which is why the student might not get the loan. But
mm.
because we were there, so we then intervened we escalated the matter and we got the student the loan.
Okay.
Right. So I think it's really a case of getting you the best loan for your profile
Mm,
and then ensuring that there are no hassles in that process. So that is really for us how it works. When we started out our journey, we started out focusing primarily on the study abroad segment.
mm,
Post pandemic, we saw a lot of demand coming in from the online or offline upskilling segments as well. So
mm.
we started another vertical that was catering to that segment.
Got
And last year, we added our NBFC as well as a partner as the lending partner on the platform. So it's again taking the Amazon analogy. Maybe we are a Cloudtail as well, or we
you.
are an
Mhm.
Amazon fulfilled partner in some cases. So that is really how it happens. For the
Got you.
lender, how it works really is two things. One is obviously customer acquisition, the student.
Mm,
But the other thing that has been more important with a lot of lenders is we've been able to help them devise the right education loan policy. So
mm,
again, going back to the example saying ki, don't do an MBA loan if you are only going to do 20 lakhs. You should
mm,
have a 1 crore limit. Or hey, can you do basis some models? You understand the employability of student. Can you do a 80 lakh loan on a 20 lakh property?
okay.
That way you can expand the pool. So I think it's really working with banks on that part. Number one, the product part, and
Mm-hmm.
number two, more importantly, on the process part.
Mm,
Right. So I gave you the Satara example. Similarly, the idea really is our lenders have access to our internal CRM. So we have created lender modules for our partners,
mm-hmm.
and they can leverage that to drive efficiencies. So what we have been able to do is if we measure, I was actually we were looking at some numbers. We made certain changes to our lender CRM. This quarter itself, our conversion rates at the partners that are using our lender CRM
Mm,
has been 50% better than it was a quarter earlier.
okay.
So it really, I mean, for a lender as well, it means more business. And then because of a higher conversion for student, also it means a better assurance of getting the loan.
Mm, got you. I understand on your marketplace you build a profile or a credit report for every student who logs in, and that report is leveraged by the NBFC or the bank to understand if a student is credit worthy or not. So tell me one thing, in typical loan process, based on the credit history, you judge whether a person is credit worthy or not, or
Yeah.
maybe CIBIL score in India context. But students are those people who most likely do not have a credit profile, or they don't do much of transactions. They're
Yeah.
newbies in the market, and usually they don't have any collateral. The student loans do not have collateral. So how do you judge, or what are the criterias that are considered in the student loan, student financing context?
Sure. Sure. So, I mean, obviously, I'll quickly summarize that what you mentioned. I think there are obviously traditional parameters like your CIBIL score, like your indebtedness ratio, kitna debt hai aapke paas versus income. Like there might be other parameters in terms of your parents as well, your parents' income, your parents' indebtedness, your parents'
Hmm,
CIBIL score, and so forth. So those are parameters we consider. Now, coming to the fact that you mentioned, okay, if it's a student who's applying and he hasn't taken a credit, so he or she will not have a credit score.
hmm,
Now, in that case, for that particular student, I'll go back to the point that I mentioned. What is the employability? So for us, really, the case is two parts: ability, willingness. The most important part is ability. The ability.
mhm,
Ability means ki hey, will I even get a job? So the reason why the Indian domestic segment you see so high NPA ratios are is
hmm,
if the student is going to get a degree, but then that degree is not going to lead to a job
hmm,
or going to lead to a very low paying job,
hmm.
then it's effectively a useless
Right.
product, useless to give a loan for that particular course,
Yeah.
right? As a lender. So really for us, the key thing and that is the GyanDhan score at the very basis,
Hmm,
is predicting probability of a student getting a job
hmm,
after he or she completes their degree.
mhm,
Now, what do we look into it? So what we did was in the first year when we moved back, both Jainesh and I had experience building models. So we had collected data from different sources and built out the first version of the model. And since
okay.
then, we have kind of built on top of it. But really, what we are trying to understand is key. Hey, what is your academic background being like?
Mhm,
Now, academic background could be what kind of school did you go to, college did you go to,
mhm,
what were your scores in college, what were your scores in standardized tests like GMAT, GRE, and so on and so forth. Right. So, what is your academic background like? Now, what is the academic future like? Which kind of school are you going to? Which kind of course are you going to? Is that course going to be in demand or not?
hmm,
Right. So, because that will have an impact on the placement. Right. Which city kind of this college might be located in? Because effectively that might have an implication.
yeah.
Right. Similarly, so this is the kind of thing in terms of the academic attributes. Then comes the your own personal attributes in terms of your professional experience. So
Hmm,
where have you worked prior? If you have prior work experience, because a lot of students who go for masters, what we see is a large chunk of them will graduate, do their undergrad, work for a couple of years, and then go for masters. So
mhm,
in that case, what was your 2 year experience? So it's almost like I try to say when we talk about MBA applicants to the top business schools, they actually evaluate your resume. It's almost similar to that. We are trying to evaluate your resume through a model and
Mm,
giving you a score basis that, hey, where do you score? And then using that to understand which kind of product will you get,
mm,
right? Because again, if you're the best customer, or your probability of getting a job is almost certain, then
mm.
you should get an unsecured loan, or you
Yeah.
should get a semi-secured loan. Versus, hey, if there is a doubt, then we'll take a security. So
Mm.
that is how really the model works at the back end.
Got you. Uh, Tell us a bit about the venture building part. As in, how did you, what were the initial challenges, or what were the different challenges that you faced along the way while building this venture, and how did you find the right set of people to take your vision forward?
So I mean, it's still a journey. It's still a journey in progress for us. So there are a lot of challenges even to this day, and we'll continue. Hopefully, we'll address a lot of those challenges along the way. But I think I'll go back to the first thing that I mentioned, that I called up Jainesh, right? So
Yeah.
I'll start from that very moment. Like I remember, I was sitting in a room in Barcelona with blackboards, kind of writing stuff on that and breaking my head. And I was getting frustrated. Like, who do I talk to? Who do I vent out? And for
Mm,
me, that was the first thing. Okay, who should my co-founder be? Right? How should that kind of balance be?
mm,
Right? If I am down, he should pick me up, or we should have a sensible argument or discussion grounded in certain things. It should not be an arbitrary argument.
mm,
Right. So I think that for me was the first key thing in terms of who my co-founder will be, or who should be my co-founder. Because
mm,
I'd read a lot of stuff on, people talk a lot of stuff here. You should have diverse kind of backgrounds or different skill sets. I mean, if
mm,
you look at Jainesh and myself, both of us are IIT graduates, and even mechanical engineering graduates from different IITs, and then joined Capital One. So couldn't be any different, right? But fundamentally, in terms of how we approach things, we are very different. Right.
okay.
So I think that is the balance I looked for, to be honest. And that's why it worked well for me as well. So for
Mm,
me, getting that co-founder was the first challenge.
mm,
I think the second challenge after that was, and that is one thing that will always be there for some time. I think hopefully it gets solved over time, but it's really building out the team. And that is a continuous problem,
mm,
continuous challenge, right? So I think we had Jayant join us as the first employee in the company as a tech guy. He's now moved on to do his PhD from the US. So
mhm,
he went ahead and pursued his higher studies. And then we had Aman, who is currently still with us, heading the marketing team. He joined us from IIT, fresh out of college. Right. So
mhm,
I think those two or three, Rachit as well, joining us as the data guy initially. I think those two or three key hires initially was quite a bit of a challenge. And I would say actually it was a challenge, but we got a bit lucky
mm,
that we got these guys to join us at the right time. But looking back again, I think it's always a case in the startup journey. I think in my mind, my summary is team matters more than anything else. If you got the right team, everything can be figured out. So I'll go back to the same thing. If I am down, who is going to pick me up? Or
mm,
am I waking up with the intent ki office ja raha hu, or am I waking up with the intent ki bhai exciting hai, I'm looking forward to meeting this guy or that guy and brainstorming with this person or that person. So
got
I think those are the two. I think for me, team is the biggest challenge. I think everything else gets solved sooner or later.
okay. My final question for you. Tell us, what is the meaning of entrepreneurship for you? How would you define the term entrepreneur, or who would you call an entrepreneur? कैसे किसको entrepreneur बोलेंगे आप?
Um, um, I'll say someone who knows how to, someone who's decent at assessing risk
Hmm.
and still is willing to take that risk. That to me is definitely one thing. And the other thing for me is really someone who has the perseverance, because I did read this quote which says it's all about um, I don't remember the exact words, but it was something around it's all about trying to stay alive till you get lucky.
Okay.
That's that's entrepreneurship per se, or that's successful startup per se. So I think that inherent in that is perseverance.
Hmm.
So I think for me, the first thing is understanding the risk part of it, and the second part is really perseverance.
From skill set point of view, what are the different skills that are required within an entrepreneur? So why I am asking this is many of our listeners, they asked themselves whether I am qualified to be an entrepreneur, or do I have what it takes to be entrepreneur. So what are the necessary skills?
So, so I think simple answer will be you'll have to be a rock star maybe if you want to be a solo entrepreneur. But otherwise, the idea really is, hey, I mean, you have a team. There
Mm,
are two or three guys who are coming together to build something, right? So I might have, which is what I said, that Jainesh and myself, from a theoretical standpoint, we might be similar, but really from a skill set perspective or the approach perspective, we are very different, right? So
mm,
I don't think that there is any one thing that, hey, you really need to have this. At least uh, the couple of things which I have seen, uh, uh, which I or let me put it this way, which I admire in people who've
mhm,
done well uh, as entrepreneurs, is really one is the ability to sell a story, ability
mhm,
to tell a story, and then the ability to sell a story.
mhm.
So that communication skills is very, very critical in my mind. The
Okay.
ability to tell your story. Uh, Personally, I think the ability to and the intellectual honesty to understand the data.
Mhm,
So having that rigor in terms of I know when I don't know things,
mhm,
or I know when I'm wrong,
mhm.
and being able to accept it. I think that is very, very important. And the third thing really is, again, I'll go back to the perseverance bit, because there will be a lot of times when you will have, when you will really feel very low and there might be challenges. It's really, you don't have to fold up at that point in time.
Mm,
Right. So you have to be aware, which is what I said, intellectually honest. You need to know when to stop.
mm,
Maybe there are times when you need to realize, hey, I need to either pivot or I need to shut this down. Maybe there is another thing I'll do later in life. But
mm.
then other point in time, there will be many people who will say what you are doing is BS, or what you're doing is not really solving a problem, or there is no problem. You need to understand, am I solving a problem? If yes, how am I solving it? Am I doing it the right way? And if that be the case, then you need to just find that one person or two person who believes in your vision and align with them, and then continue that journey.
Got you. On this note, we will close the session. Thanks for your time, Ankit, and it was a pleasure to have you on our platform.
Thanks a lot.